Imagine a mighty commander at the very peak of his glory. Yesterday, he commanded colossal war elephants and made entire nations tremble with primal animal fear. Today, he crawls across scorching stone ground. His flesh literally slides from his bones like a rotted, filthy rug. The tips of his fingers drop away one by one, falling directly into the road dust. Thick blood mixed with yellow pus leaves a foul, sticky trail across sharp rocks. The former master of the world has been reduced to a pitiful, wet fledgling barely fallen from its nest. The Almighty preserved the last flickering embers of life within him for one singular and great purpose. This man of towering pride was required to witness the annihilation of his colossal army with his own rotting eyes. History textbooks shyly skirt the details of this ghastly agony. The truth lies buried deep in the ancient sands of the Arabian Peninsula. This is the story of absolute human arrogance and its monstrous heavenly reckoning. Chapter 1. Blood-Soaked Sand. It all began long before the year of the elephant, in the fertile lands of Yemen, a country where the air always carried the sweetness of frankincense and the sharp bite of precious spices. The local markets overflowed with exotic wares. Here ruled a cruel and imperious king named Du Nawas. He had embraced the Jewish faith and resolved to burn out every trace of descent from his realm with an iron hand. The inhabitants of the prosperous city of Najran held steadfastly to the faith of the prophet Jesus, peace be upon him. They read the gospel openly and in secret. They refused absolutely to betray their most sacred convictions. The king issued them an ultimatum of ruthless simplicity: renounce your religion or face a war of annihilation. The leader of the Christians, Abdullah ibn Samir, chose the clash of swords. He chose to die a free man. The scorching Yemeni sky quickly turned black with the dense, choking smoke of enormous fires. The smell of burning timber mingled with the metallic stench of freshly spilled blood. The king's army carried out a merciless massacre through the narrow city streets. The Christian community was utterly destroyed. The mutilated bodies of its defenders carpeted the squares of what had once been the beautiful city of Najran. Only one man managed to break free from that inferno. His name was Ibn Salab. Fleeing his relentless pursuers, he crossed hundreds of miles of scorched, waterless desert. His feet, lacerated by sharp stones, finally carried him into the marble halls of the Byzantine emperor. The cold gleam of imperial gold and the rustle of heavy silk dazzled the exhausted fugitive. He recounted to the ruler of Rome in vivid detail the terrible fate that had befallen the Arabian Christians. The emperor listened to the harrowing account with glacial composure. The distance was far too vast for the deployment of heavy Byzantine legions. He contented himself with a sealed imperial scroll and redirected Ibn Salab to the African continent, to the king of the Abyssinians, a man named Negus. This powerful African ruler was himself a sincere follower of the prophet Jesus, peace be upon him. The battered Ibn Salab carried the letter across the turbulent dark waters of the Red Sea. King Negus broke open the Byzantine seal. Righteous fury instantly ignited in his broad chest. He answered at once the call of his dying brethren in faith. The African shore trembled under the heavy march of thousands of armored boots. The king assembled a vast, well-armed force for a seaborne invasion of Arabia. Command of this enormous punitive expedition was given to a fierce and battle-hardened warrior named Ariat. The great Abyssinian fleet safely crossed the narrow sea strait. The African army crashed onto the Yemeni shore like a devastating and deadly tsunami. Ariat burned to wash away the blood of the Najran martyrs with the blood of their killers. The tribe of Du Nawas had by then been gravely weakened by constant internal strife. The Yemeni warriors proved utterly helpless against the furious onslaught of the iron African infantry. In the decisive and bloody battle, Abyssinian blades flashed with lethal precision. King Du Nawas fell dead into a wide pool of his own thick blood. The mission of the Abyssinian king had been carried out flawlessly. Soon a new royal command arrived from across the sea. The king ordered his victorious commander to remain on the conquered foreign lands. Ariat submitted without a word and planted his battle standards over the high palaces of Yemen. He became the undisputed ruler of the subjugated country. The blazing Arabian sun shone brightly upon his magnificent triumph. The scent of temple incense now mixed sharply with the acrid smell of foreign sweat and weapon oil. Power holds a terrible property. It poisons the minds of great generals with terrifying speed. In the ranks of the victorious Abyssinians, the poisonous seeds of a new and fratricidal conflict were already germinating. The shadow of an imminent war between brothers fell heavily across the ancient stone walls of Yemen's cities. Chapter 2. The Cunning Trap of a Ruler. The scorching air of Yemen trembles with tension. Power over the conquered land has proven both irresistibly sweet and lethally poisonous. Two enormous armies of blood-kindred Abyssinians stand facing one another. Road dust settles on the sweat-slicked black faces of hardened warriors. The air reeks of heated iron, fear, and the stale sweat of thousands of soldiers. The ringing of battle sabers against leather scabbards foretells a terrible and bloody slaughter. When two kings rule one people, a split into two camps becomes inevitable. Abraha had ruled here before, and now Ariat had been appointed alongside him. The African legions fractured into two hostile and irreconcilable factions. Brother stood ready to drive a sharp blade into the chest of his own kinsman for the sake of another's ambitions. Abraha surveys the endless rows of spear-bristling legions with a cold, calculating eye. His compact, powerful frame is concealed beneath heavy bronze armor. He possesses a profound intelligence and has absolutely no desire to see his loyal soldiers die a pointless death. The commander dispatches a swift courier to the enemy camp, bearing a fateful message for the towering and immensely powerful Ariat. Let us not spill the blood of our people over a quarrel between ourselves. Let us settle this with blades in single combat. The one who survives shall rule, and all Abyssinians will unite behind him. The bold proposal strikes its mark precisely. The pride of the mighty Ariat is wounded. He condescendingly agrees to cut the knot of deep-seated conflict with a single stroke. The ground between the two hostile armies is cleared of every stone. Warriors hold their breath in rigid tension. An absolute and death-like silence descends over the burned Yemeni earth. The two commanders advance slowly toward one another with bared and gleaming blades. The giant Ariat hurls himself at his shorter opponent with a furious roar, pouring every ounce of his inhuman strength into the blow. His heavy saber slices through the hot air with a whistle and strikes Abraha full across the face. Hot crimson blood instantly floods the wounded commander's eyes. By sheer force of will, he keeps his feet after that devastating blow. In that same instant comes a completely unexpected resolution. Abraha's faithful vizier, a man named Atuda, was standing just beside the dueling ground. He draws his weapon in a single lightning motion. One short arc of a sharp blade ends the life of the triumphant giant. The vizier lays Ariat on the dusty earth with one lethal stroke. The heavy body of the dead commander strikes the ground with a hollow thud at the feet of his stunned army. Abraha survives his terrible facial wound by the narrowest of margins, fate's mercy measured in mere inches. His cunning calculation has paid off entirely. Tens of thousands of Abyssinians obediently lower their weapons in complete submission to the victor. The Africans unite once more under the rule of one wise and ruthless commander. News of the unauthorized killing of Ariat flies across the Red Sea like a dark bird of prey. The African king Negus erupts in indescribable fury. His eyes fill with blood at such outrageous insubordination from his own subordinate. The ruler slams his fist on the heavy carved throne with a thunderous crack. He swears publicly before his courtiers that he will take terrible revenge on the rebellious viceroy. The monarch utters a fearsome oath to drag Abraha by his hair and personally trample the earth upon which he walks. The meaning of those words is crystal clear to every courtier. The king has sworn to kill the insolent usurper of the Yemeni throne with his own hands. The grim royal message soon lands before Abraha. It contains direct accusations of the treacherous killing of the lawful viceroy. Abraha is famed for his piety and deep religiosity. Base and open treachery has never been in his nature. He reads the death sentence carefully, and a crooked smile twists his scarred face. The cunning ruler quickly devises a stroke of genius to save his own life and preserve the honor of the African king simultaneously. Abraha gives his servants an apparently insane command. Sharp razors shave every last curl of black hair from his head. He carefully collects the shorn locks into a small, clean bundle. Then he takes an empty leather pouch, steps out onto the scorching street of Yemen, and scoops into it a handful of dry, dusty earth from beneath his own boots. He intends to send these strange gifts to the enraged monarch, fulfilling his terrible oath to the letter, without a single drop of blood being shed. The time comes to write his letter of justification. Abraha takes up a reed pen and dips it in black ink. "O king, what difference does it make to you whether it is I or Aryat? Aryat was your slave. I am your slave too, and one who knows the Abyssinians far better." He describes the true cause of the fatal duel in vivid and convincing detail. He explains that Aryat was the first to act against reason and put the unity of the African army at risk. "I found a way out of the situation, preventing the bloodshed that would have come from our quarrel." He agreed to single combat. After his death, the Abyssinians reunited as before. At the close of his letter, Abraha adds the most important words of all, lines laden with deep reverence and razor-sharp cunning. "So that your oath may not prove false, trample this earth. Here also are the hairs from my head. Pull them as you please." The messenger departs immediately for Africa with this remarkable cargo. Abraha waits in taut suspense, his life hanging by the slenderest thread of a king's fury or mercy. King Negus opens the pouch of Yemeni soil and unfolds the bundle of shorn hair. He reads the sweet yet wise words of his viceroy. The royal face suddenly breaks into a broad smile. His righteous anger evaporates completely from his heart. The ruler recognizes the astonishing resourcefulness and loyalty of Abraha for what they are, silently pardons him, and exhales with relief. As the ancient sages say, it is better to have even an enemy who is clever. Negus sends a reply carrying words of gratitude and, with what seems an almost casual wave of the hand, writes a brief dispensation. "Live as you see fit." So brilliant diplomacy and a razor-sharp mind extinguished forever the lethal enmity between two great rulers. Chapter 3. A Temple to Vanity. The green hills of Yemen ring without pause to the hammering of thousands of mallets. Abraha resolved to raise in the city of Sana'a a grand church on a scale never before seen. This colossal architectural masterpiece was intended to stand as a visible expression of his gratitude to King Negus. In truth, the ruler was erecting a monumental monument to his own boundless vanity. Tens of thousands of slaves and master craftsmen labored under the blazing southern sun from dawn to dusk. Countless camel caravans delivered the rarest stone and precious metals daily from every corner of the world. Heavy stone blocks crept slowly upward along wooden scaffolding. With every new tier raised, the pride of the Yemeni viceroy soared ever higher toward the very heavens. The enormous mobilization of every available resource bore its dense fruit. Before long, the incredible construction was complete. Over the city of Sana'a rose proudly one of the most beautiful and magnificent churches in the entire known world. Its domes blinded the eyes with brilliant golden radiance against a cloudless sky. Exquisite mosaics and carved ornaments adorned every square inch of its towering walls. The fragrance of the rarest imported incense streamed constantly through the high arched windows. Abraha surveyed his creation with self-satisfied eyes. His ambitions now reached far beyond a mere architectural triumph. He wrote a bold and audacious letter to Negus. "I wish the Arabs to make pilgrimage to it rather than to the Kaaba." The ruler of Yemen had set his mind to rewriting 1,000 years of history, to forcibly rerouting the sacred paths of pilgrims. Rumors of this monstrous and sacrilegious plan spread swiftly along every dusty road in Arabia. Nomads passed the words of the deranged ruler to one another with horror and mounting rage. The news struck deep into the hearts of the Bedouin. It struck particularly hard in the soul of one man from the ancient clan of Kinana, a true Arab and a devoted pilgrim who had always made his journey exclusively to the sacred Kaaba. His blood boiled with fury at the very thought of replacing the house of the Almighty with a man-made temple of stone and gold. On a dark, moonless night, he crept secretly into the city of Sana'a. He slipped unnoticed into the deep shadow of Abraha's magnificent church. In a surge of righteous indignation, he deliberately and thoroughly desecrated the altar of the new temple. This audacious act was an open slap across the face of the proud ruler. In the morning, the priest discovered the traces of the night intrusion with horror. The stench of filth struck them sharp and sudden amidst the golden ornaments and precious stones. Word of the desecration instantly reached Abraha's ears. His face darkened with wild, uncontrollable fury. He took the act not as mere hooliganism, but as a personal and mortal insult. He paced his opulent chambers like a wounded lion, raging. He began interrogating every person he could find with brutal urgency. Who dared commit such unheard-of insolence? He promised loudly before his courtiers that he would not rest until the guilty party was found. Spies and informants rushed to scour every dark corner of the city for witnesses. Before long, the secret guard delivered the needed intelligence to the ruler. Under brutal torture, chance witnesses confessed everything. With trembling voices, they revealed that the nighttime intruder had been one of the Arabs who regularly made pilgrimage to the Kaaba. This information became the perfect pretext for Abraha to act on his long-held and deranged plans. His eyes ignited with a fanatical, vengeful fire. The ruler of Yemen swore publicly before his people that he would march to the ancient Kaaba. He announced his firm and open intention to raze the sacred house to the ground. Pride had finally blinded his reason completely. He had resolved to hurl an open challenge not merely at men, but at the Creator of the heavens and the earth. The Abyssinian war machine lurched into immediate motion. Abraha assembled a colossal army of seasoned warriors, hardened by dozens of campaigns. Thousands of African spearmen and swordsmen formed endless, perfectly ordered ranks. The bronze gleam of their heavy armor outshone the sun itself. The heavy footfall of the marching legions made the earth itself tremble. At the head of this invincible armada marched towering war elephants, the most fearsome weapons the ancient world had to offer. This iron tide moved inexorably toward the sacred city of Mecca. The terrible news of the approaching catastrophe hung like a black storm cloud over all of Arabia. The hearts of Yemeni Arabs were darkened with deep grief. They understood all too clearly the monstrous disparity of forces. Yet faith proved far stronger than animal fear. The freedom-loving tribes resolved to wage holy war against Abraha and his seemingly invincible army of death. The first to stand in the path of the Abyssinian armored machine was the brave chieftain Du Nafar. He swiftly rallied his most loyal supporters and formally declared war on Abraha. His small band of Arabs flung themselves with desperate courage against the iron formations of the African infantry. The air filled with the clash of shattering sabers and the death cries of warriors. The engagement was brief and breathtakingly brutal. The army of Du Nafar suffered a crushing and predictable defeat in the unequal battle. The earth soaked deep with the hot blood of the defenders of the holy sanctuaries. The chieftain himself was taken into shameful captivity. Nafar was brought before the haughty Abraha in heavy iron chains. The proud Arab understood that his life now hung by the thinnest of threads. He looked steadily into the eyes of the merciless ruler and spoke words full of desperate hope. "If you do not kill me but take me with you as a prisoner, it will be to your advantage." Abraha coldly calculated the value of a living and noble hostage. Nafar was forced to swear a humiliating oath of loyalty to his bitterest enemy. The Africans took him along on the long march as a prized captive. Death retreated temporarily from the Arab chieftain thanks to the cold mercy of Abraha. The Abyssinian army moved forward with still greater confidence toward its inescapable and terrible destiny. Chapter 4. Shadows over Mecca. The colossal Abyssinian army moves like an enormous iron serpent through the burned Arabian sands without mercy or pause. The earth groans dully under the measured, heavy tread of the African legions. The bronze gleam of countless shields and sharp spears blinds the rare and terrified nomads who catch a glimpse of its passing. The next desperate defender of the sacred land is the brave Nufail ibn Habib. His small but proud fighting force bars the path of the tens of thousands-strong invasion force. The fierce battle cry of the Arabs drowns in the deafening roar of Abyssinian war horns. A brief but staggeringly bloody battle erupts. A handful of brave men hurls itself with desperate fury against the impenetrable wall of Abyssinian shields. The ringing of shattering blades and the crunch of pierced armor merge into a single, horrifying cacophony of death. The iron machine of Abraha grinds down the defenders' ranks without mercy. The invader's army utterly destroys its opposition within hours. The torn bodies of Arab warriors carpet the scorching desert stones in dense rows. The wounded Nufail ibn Habib himself falls into humiliating captivity. Death already raises its merciless blade above him, but natural cunning overrides his pride. The prisoner understands his only value to the foreign king. He knows every obscure path and every dried-up well in these harsh Arab lands with perfect intimacy. Abraha smiles coldly and agrees to spare his life. The captive, shackled in heavy chains, is ordered to walk at the head of the vast army as its guide. The black cloud of invaders draws ever closer to its principal target. Before long, the advance elements of the Abyssinian army halt at the flourishing oasis of Taif. The local inhabitants watch with animal terror as the endless rows of foreign tents and titanic elephants spread across their landscape. The thick, sweet fragrance of Taif's blossoming gardens is instantly overwhelmed by the heavy stench of a military encampment. Fear for their own lives and property drives the local nobility to cowardly betrayal. A man named Masud ibn Muqsi al-Thaqafi creeps sycophantically toward the commander's tent, his back bent in eager subservience, his eyes darting like a cornered jackal. He begins to pour sweet poison of flattery directly into the ears of the proud Abraha. Offering words calculated to please Abraha entirely, he promises to send a reliable man, an experienced guide who would show them the shortest road to the Kaaba. He dispatches with the Abyssinians his best pathfinder, a man named Abu Rigal. The traitor leads the army of tens of thousands directly toward the heart of Arabia. The enormous force reaches successfully a place called Mugamas, dangerously close to the sacred city of Mecca. It is here that the Almighty delivers his first warning blow against the collaborators of the enemy. At Mugamas, Abu Rigal suddenly collapses, writhing in unbearable pain. His face blackens instantly, and thick, white foam pours from his mouth. The traitor falls gravely ill and dies in terrible agony, as though struck by an invisible blade. His body is hastily buried in a shallow pit by the roadside, with not the slightest ceremony or honor. It is said that Arabs to this day hurl stones with contempt at the cursed grave of Abu Rigal. Abraha, encamped at Mugamas, resolves to psychologically break the will of the Meccans before the final assault. Inside his tent, heavy darkness is thick with the scent of incense. The commander summons his trusted military chief, Aswad ibn Masud. He assigns him an audacious task with a brutal purpose behind it. An Abyssinian detachment is to slip out in the darkness of night and drive off all the Meccan livestock from the pastures. A cruel method of testing the city's resolve and fighting spirit. The Abyssinians dissolve silently into the night like a pack of hungry desert hyenas. By morning, Aswad has successfully seized all the livestock grazing in the steppes. Among the vast plunder are 200 prime camels, magnificent animals belonging to the grandfather of the messenger of God, peace be upon him, the venerable Abdul Mutalib. Simultaneously with this brazen raid, Abraha dispatches an official envoy to the city. A messenger named Hunada carries the Yemeni ruler's ultimatum to the Meccan people. He has been given strict orders to meet with their leader and convey clearly and unmistakably the purpose of the Abyssinian mission. At that critical hour, the leader of the Meccans was the wise and noble Abdul Mutalib. Hunada stands before the chieftain of the Quraysh. The air in the room of negotiations rings with invisible tension. The envoy tells him everything and briefly outlines Abraha's terrible intention. Hunada attempts to reassure the Quraysh with lying promises of safety for their lives. He will not make war against you, the messenger assures them smoothly. He will only destroy the Kaaba and withdraw. The face of Abdul Mutalib remains perfectly calm and unreadable. In his eyes there is not the faintest shadow of animal fear before the colossal war machine of the enemy. He replied to the messenger firmly, "The Kaaba is the sacred house of the Almighty." His words fall like hammer blows on granite. He gives Hunada an answer filled with the deepest and most unshakable faith. If the Almighty wills it, he will protect his house. Whether he does so or not, that is his affair. We are powerless to stop you. These wise words strike the envoy with their extraordinary inner force. Hunada recognizes that he stands before a man of exceptional strength of spirit. The messenger respectfully asks Abdul Mutalib to come personally with him to Abraha's camp for direct negotiations. The chieftain of the Quraysh agrees without a moment's hesitation to step into the very jaws of the enraged African lion. Chapter 5. The Wisdom of a Chieftain. Abraha's camp sprawls across Mugamas like a vast and threatening stain upon the land. Abdul Mutalib walks with a steady stride through a sea of hostile spearmen. The African warriors watch the tall, white-haired Arab pass with unconcealed astonishment. In his bearing there is not the slightest trace of fear before death. Suddenly, among the iron-clad Abyssinians, he recognizes a familiar face. Abdul Mutalib encounters his old friend Nafar, shackled in heavy chains of dishonor. They exchange a brief conversation on the dusty road. Abdul Mutalib asks whether his friend can offer any assistance to him within the enemy's camp. The exhausted prisoner laments his wretched lot bitterly. "I am Abraha's captive. What help can a prisoner offer?" Yet his eyes suddenly kindle with a small and flickering hope. "But Unasis, who tends the elephant, is my friend." Nafar gives his firm word that through this important man he will do everything in his power for the Qurayshi chieftain. The prisoner goes immediately to Unasis and says warmly that Abdul Mutalib is the dearest person in the world to him. The keeper of the lead war elephant at once promises his assistance and leads the guest directly to the opulent tent of Abraha. The heavy silk curtain is pulled aside before the noble Qurayshi. Inside the royal tent reigns a smoky half-darkness, richly scented with Yemeni frankincense and expensive oriental oils. This is the chieftain of the Quraysh, Abdul Mutalib, Unasis announces solemnly to the ruler of Yemen. He describes Abdul Mutalib in generous terms, before the face of the formidable ruler, noting that he gives charity lavishly and even feeds the wild birds in the mountains, and enumerates all his virtues with care. I ask that you hear him out. Abraha finds himself literally spellbound by the grandeur and inner radiance emanating from the old man. The African commander receives Abdul Mutalib with every honor and seats him respectfully beside himself on the soft cushions. Then, through a nimble interpreter, he asks why the Qurayshi has come to his hostile camp. In a completely calm and level voice, Abdul Mutalib states the purpose of his visit. "Return to me the 200 camels that are mine." A ringing and thunderous silence fell over the tent. Abraha stared at his interpreter in surprised and almost disappointed disbelief. The African ruler could not trust his own ears. "When you entered, I felt deep respect for you," he said with a note of unmistakable condescension. "But now you have disappointed me somewhat." "Why?" Abdul Muttalib asked without agitation, looking the conqueror directly in the eye. Abraha explained the reason for his sharp amazement with visible emotion. "I have come with an enormous army to destroy the house in which you and your forefathers performed their worship. And you have not even mentioned it, but trouble yourself only over your few unfortunate camels." The Qurayshi's answer rang out like a clap of thunder on a clear day and entered history forever. "These are my camels. I am their owner. As for the Kaaba, it has its own owner, and he himself will protect it." The words fell with absolute, iron certainty. Abraha was utterly crushed by this incomprehensible, towering faith. After this brief philosophical exchange, the ruler immediately ordered all the stolen camels returned. Abdul Mutalib departed from the enemy camp whole and unharmed, his great herd restored. He returned to Mecca and told the Quraysh everything that had transpired in the enemy encampment, then issued them a strict command. "Leave the city at once, disperse into the surrounding hills and mountains, and take firm refuge there." The emptied streets of the sacred city sank into a frightening and wordless silence. Then Abdul Mutalib approached the walls of the ancient temple. Grasping the heavy bolt of the Kaaba's door, he lifted his heart in prayer to the Almighty with all the sincerity he possessed. "Since the enemy of this house is your enemy, drive him out." He asked the All-Powerful to protect his own sanctuary. The fateful morning breaks over the conqueror's camp. At Mughamis, Abraha rises early, orders the war horns sounded, and commands the army to march on Mecca. The tens of thousands surge into furious motion. The Abyssinians had with them a great war elephant by the name of Mahmud, so remarkable that the Almighty himself mentioned him in the Quran as a great sign. It is said that this elephant had been sent by King Negus himself, at Abraha's personal request, from distant Africa. According to one account, Mahmud was the only elephant with Abraha, a solitary mountain of living flesh towering above the entire army. Other traditions speak of many elephants. Some accounts give the number as 12 precisely. God alone knows the truth of it. The sun begins to blaze mercilessly, heralding a terrible day. Just before the departure, at the very moment when the great Mahmud has been fully fitted with his heavy war armor, something inconceivable occurs. The cunning guide Nufail approaches the enormous animal quietly and draws very close. Like a man addressing another man of reason, he whispers softly into the animal's great ear. "Sit down. Rise only to turn back toward Yemen. The place where you now stand is sacred ground. Treat it with the greatest reverence." Before he had finished speaking, Mahmud sank with a heavy sigh to his knees. A cloud of thick, hot dust rose into the air. The handlers fell into genuine panic. They tried to force the animal up, coaxed it with soft words, beat it brutally with sharp iron goads across its tender skin. The elephant did not move a single inch, as though he had become a solid outcrop of rock. When the handlers in desperation turned Mahmud toward Yemen, he sprang instantly to his feet, lifting himself with the ease of a bird, and bolted as if carried on a wild wind away from the sacred city. The Abyssinians then tried deceitfully to turn him eastward, towards Syria, and Mahmud moved willingly in that direction at a brisk pace. But when they attempted once more to trick him into facing the forbidden sanctuary, the animal sank again heavily to his knees, exactly as before. Seeing that something supernatural was unfolding, the wily Nufale, nimble as a fox, quietly stepped back from the frantic crowd of handlers. He climbed unnoticed to the top of a high, rocky hill and settled there to watch attentively what would happen next to these doomed Abyssinians, as though the Almighty himself had entrusted him with witnessing the finale of this great drama. Chapter 6. Birds of Stone. The cloudless Arabian sky darkens with unnatural and terrifying speed. The blazing sun retreats behind a dense, swiftly advancing mass of cloud. At that moment, from the direction of the sea, there came a flock of extraordinary birds resembling swallows. Their wings produced an ominous whistle, like the sound of tearing thin silk. The enormous black mass covers the entire horizon and plummets in a steep dive toward the invaders' encampment. Each bird carried 3 lethal stones, one in its beak and one in each of its sharp talons. Millions of these tiny projectiles carry within them the concentrated fury of heaven. The flock encircles the entirety of Megamis in a tight ring and pelts the tens of thousands of Abraha's army with a merciless hail of stones. Then absolute and unimaginable carnage begins. African warriors raise their heavy copper shields with screams of terror. Iron armor proves utterly useless against this supernatural assault. Each small stone pierces thick metal clean through, like a hot knife through soft butter. Every man struck by a heavenly projectile dies instantaneously in a hideous death. Tiny stone fragments tear human flesh apart from within. The ground in the valley is rapidly blanketed by a dense carpet of broken bodies. The previously invincible warriors of Abraha scatter in blind panic across the camp, losing all reason in the face of this unprecedented horror. They trample one another in a desperate scramble to escape, and those who attempted to flee found the very road turning miraculously against them, becoming a lethal, slick trap of blood and sand. The Abyssinians lose entirely their human form and their reason. They begin frantically searching for Nufale, desperate for him to show them any road to salvation. The doomed mob stumbles among the burning tents, utterly lost, and the wily Nufale, safely settled on his high rocky mountain, watches them with genuine satisfaction. From that vantage point, everything below is perfectly visible, spread before him like an open hand. He quickly grasps that the remnants of the shattered army are trying to flee and are searching helplessly for him to show them an escape route. Standing at the very summit of the rocky hill, he begins to declaim mocking verses at the top of his voice. "Where will you run when the Almighty himself has taken hold of you?" The echo of his words drowns in the wailing of dying legionnaires. Amid this universal chaos, Abraha receives his own most terrible and personal sentence. He does not perish instantly from a stone out of heaven. The Almighty has preserved him alive until this moment deliberately, so that his own eyes might watch his supposedly invincible army die in prolonged agony. The proud commander falls prey to a hideous and unknown disease. His body begins to literally rot and disintegrate while he yet lives. The tips of his fingers suddenly blacken and drop away before the eyes of his surviving servants. From the open wounds pours an unceasing stream of thick black blood and fetid yellow pus. Resembling a pitiful, naked fledgling just fallen from its nest, utterly wrung out by pain, he begins his final, agonizing journey home. The great conqueror, losing pieces of his own flesh with every step, made it with unimaginable difficulty to his magnificent palace in Sana'a. The air in his throne room now reeked constantly of rotting meat. In Sana'a he began to come apart like an old and moldering carpet, losing his limbs one after another in terror and disbelief. His once mighty frame dissolved into a formless, putrefying mass. In such monstrous humiliation and unbearable agony, Abraha died, cursing the day of his birth and his boundless, monstrous pride. His grandiose church, for whose sake this entire war had been set in motion, stood on as a perfectly useless monument to vanity. Of that colossal army, only one single man survived, Abraha's faithful vizier, Abu Yaqsan. He was preserved to serve as a living witness to the divine wrath. He had been spared for one purpose alone, to return to Africa and bear testimony to everything that had transpired. As he fled in panic from the field of slaughter, a single black bird flew constantly above him, following him relentlessly all the way to the African continent, clutching in its beak a stone with his name upon it. The moment the exhausted vizier arrived before the throne of Negus and described in vivid detail everything that had happened in Arabia, the bird released its stone. The tiny projectile pierced the top of his skull and exited below with a whistle, cutting the last thread of this tragedy in full view of the astounded king. Such was the terrible fate of the invincible army of Abraha. The great war elephants that had marched with the force and shaken the earth beneath their feet also perished in mass numbers under the hail of heavenly stones. Of all of them, only the obedient Mahmud survived. The Creator mercifully preserved this great animal for the deep reverence he had shown to the forbidden sacred land. The wise elephant returned to Yemen completely whole and entirely unharmed. That great year in which the army of Abraha and his elephants perished by miracle, the Arabs named forever the Year of the Elephant. It is said that in this very same memorable year, the Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace, was born. The greatest historical miracle of the saving of the Kaaba became the harbinger of the appearance of the last messenger of God, and a great mercy to all the worlds.